Right now, in July 2025, America is on fire politically, morally, and emotionally. The infamous Epstein files, long buried in secrecy and speculation, have exploded into the national conversation again. But this time, they've collided with something far more volatile: the presidency of Donald Trump. This scandal has reignited outrage, fueled conspiracy theories, and fractured trust in a system already teetering. For many Americans, this isn't just a controversy. It feels like the last straw, the legend of the files. For years, Jeffrey Epstein has stood as a dark symbol of unchecked power, predatory wealth, and elite protection. His web of manipulation stretched across borders. High-profile celebrities, former presidents, tech giants, and royalty were all rumored to have flown on his jet, visited his island, or walked the marble floors of his New York mansion. But behind the rumors stood a haunting reality: hundreds of victims, many of them underage, trafficked, and silenced. The term client list became a rallying cry, shorthand for the public's demand for answers. The people wanted names, they wanted accountability, and they believed those names were locked away somewhere inside Epstein's files. Those documents, if released, could alter reputations, careers, and even governments. The promises begin. When Donald Trump reclaimed the White House in January 2025, many of his supporters saw it as a second chance, not just for him, but for truth. Trump had long hinted at exposing Epstein's network, and in early 2025, his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, seemed ready to do exactly that. She declared that the infamous client list was on her desk. She referenced tens of thousands of hours of security footage, files, records, and what she described as a truckload of evidence being reviewed. The implications were enormous. Trump's allies claimed that past administrations, especially under Clinton and Obama, had actively suppressed the Epstein investigation. Now, they said, the lid was about to blow. Among right-wing circles and even some victim advocacy groups, hope surged. It seemed justice might finally prevail. The bombshell reversal. Then, without warning, everything changed. On July 7th, the Department of Justice and the FBI released a joint statement that shocked even the skeptics. Their findings: there was no verified client list, there would be no further public disclosure, and they reaffirmed their conclusion that Epstein had died by suicide in 2019. The sudden shift stunned those who had waited years for transparency. What happened to the truckload of evidence? Where was the list Bondi had claimed to be reviewing? What happened to the victims who were promised justice? All of it vanished in a single memo. The backlash was immediate and explosive. Public betrayal. To millions, this wasn't just a disappointment, it was betrayal. People who had put their faith in Trump's return felt like fools. Victims who had dared to hope now felt abandoned again. And conservative media, once united behind Trump, began to splinter. Online forums exploded. Hashtags like Charles Epstein cover-up, Schuster where are the files, and no more lies trended nationwide. Right-wing influencers demanded answers from Bondi. Fox News ran segments openly questioning the administration's silence. And in Washington, the political stakes escalated. House Judiciary Democrats launched a formal request for hearings on the DOJ's decision. Even some Republicans joined in, seeking to distance themselves from the fallout. This wasn't just another news cycle. This was a crisis of trust. Trump's backpedal. And then there was Trump himself. Once, he'd openly implied Epstein's death was suspicious. In speeches, interviews, and tweets, he'd suggested a massive cover-up. In 2020, he promised the public would get the full truth. In 2024, he ran on a campaign of no more secrets. Now, he claimed the entire story was manufactured by Democrats, that the Epstein files were a hoax. He suggested it was all a distraction designed by Biden, Obama, and others to undermine his presidency. The about-face was staggering and impossible to ignore. For his base, it raised a painful question. Was this the same man who promised to expose everything? The civil war within. What makes this even more explosive is what's happening behind the scenes. Reports have surfaced of fierce internal conflict within the Trump administration. Sources close to the White House describe a growing rift between Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, a former Secret Service agent and longtime Trump ally. Bongino, insiders say, is furious. He allegedly accused Bondi of mishandling the investigation, burying the truth, and failing the victims. Some reports even claim Bongino threatened to resign over the issue, a move that would be devastating to the administration's credibility. Neither Bondi nor Bongino has spoken publicly, but silence in politics is often louder than words. The collapse of trust. This controversy isn't just about Epstein, it's about trust and whether we still have any left. According to the 2025 Edelman Trust Barometer, trust in government institutions is at an all-time low. Just over a third of Americans believe their government is truthful. Pew Research shows that confidence in the justice system has plummeted, especially among young voters and working-class citizens. And scandals like this, where bold promises are made, then quietly reversed, destroy what little faith remains. In a healthy democracy, reality, broken promises lead to accountability. In a failing one, they lead to apathy, extremism, or both. The Great Divide. This saga is also a mirror showing us just how divided we've become. For some, the Epstein files represent a global conspiracy, one they believe the government is actively hiding. For others, the entire narrative is a far-right fantasy, weaponized to smear political enemies. But what's most alarming isn't which side is right. It's that there's no common ground left, no shared reality, no room for discussion. This division isn't just political, it's emotional, tribal, deep, and every unresolved scandal, if from Epstein to elections to censorship, pushes us further apart. If we can't agree on what truth even is, how can we ever heal? The misinformation era. This also exposes another crisis, one we often ignore: the war on truth itself. In 2025, most Americans get their news from social media. According to the Digital News Report, nearly 60% of U.S. citizens say they rely primarily on platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and X to understand current events. And yet, 73% admit they struggle to tell fact from fiction online. Scandals like this thrive in that chaos. When institutions fail to provide clarity, people fill the void with speculation, fear, and propaganda. And when trust collapses, conspiracy becomes the default. We're living in the misinformation age, and few scandals highlight that better than this one. The road ahead. So what does this all mean for the country, for our politics, and for the future? First, it means elections will be shaped by anger, not hope. Already, political analysts are seeing shifts in Trump's base, not just in approval, but in enthusiasm. Some are tuning out, some are turning on him. Second, it means we'll likely see more radical voices rise, people promising vengeance, exposure, or revolution. In the void of truth, rage takes over. And finally, it means the Epstein story is far from over. There are still sealed documents, still survivors, still whistleblowers, and still millions of Americans who want answers. The question is, will they get them, or will history repeat itself? The silence after the storm. But here's the most haunting part of this entire story. It's not the sudden reversal. It's not even the political infighting. It's the silence that follows. Ask yourself, why did the government go quiet so fast? Why did media coverage taper off just days after the DOJ's memo? Why did the people who once shouted from rooftops suddenly stop talking? Because silence is strategic. It kills momentum. It makes outrage feel like a phase. It isolates the curious, the angry, the hopeful, until they question whether they ever had a right to ask in the first place. But history doesn't forget. There are still victims out there. Real people who lived through horror, people whose stories were used for political gain and then discarded. Their pain doesn't end with a press release. Their trauma doesn't fade because officials said, "Case closed." And for the rest of us, the lesson here is chilling. If the most talked about, watched, and publicized case in decades can end in a whisper, what else are they hiding? It's not just about Epstein. It's about precedent. Because if this is how the system treats one of the biggest scandals of the century, what hope do smaller truths have? What happens to stories that don't make the headlines? What happens when power becomes the gatekeeper of what we're allowed to remember? That's why this story matters, because it isn't just about the past. It's about the next cover-up, the next reversal, the next betrayal, and the only thing that stops it is us. We don't need to believe every theory, but we do need to ask the hard questions again and again until silence is no longer an option. Your voice matters. What do you believe? Was this a broken promise or a deliberate cover-up? Are we watching justice unfold or justice being buried? Let us know in the comments below. Don't just scroll past this story. Be part of it. Like, subscribe, and don't forget to press the bell icon for more hard-hitting analysis. Because silence benefits those in power, while speaking out confronts them. And the truth? It doesn't stay hidden forever. It just needs people willing to demand it.